This is American Real. I am Roger Brooks. Welcome to the show.
This is American Real TV,
There's so much to talk to you about.
where everyone
You are a true inspiration.
has
We're all trying to do our part to change the world.
a story.
What's your mission? What do you want your legacy to be? You have such a great story. I cannot wait to share it. Welcome to the American Real family. I cannot wait to air this episode.
And now, here's your host, Roger Brooks.
It's rare to encounter someone whose career can be defined by a singular achievement, a dedication to education, and unshakable belief in the power of daily inspiration. Yet today's guest embodies all three. Dennis J. Henson is the founder and president of Vanguard Marketing and Investments, a renowned leader in both the real estate and personal growth industries, and an educator who has transformed the lives of countless individuals. With over 30 years of experience, Dennis has not only built a successful career, but also cultivated a philosophy that empowers others to strive for more. When asked what's had the greatest impact on his students, his answer was simple yet profound. I quote, "Form the habit of reading something every day that educates or inspires." That philosophy is at the heart of his latest book, Real Impact: Daily Inspiration. Over the years, Dennis has collected quotes, poems, and empowering stories that moved him personally. His new book shares 32 captivating stories, over 100 inspiring quotes, and timeless wisdom, offering readers a powerful foundation for growth, success, and fulfillment. Dennis's approach is rooted in a belief he calls law of nature, the idea that planting seeds of health, success, and prosperity in our minds will lead to a harvest of abundance multiplied many times over. I'd like to welcome a true educator, leader, and inspiration to so many. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate you having me today.
It's an honor, and I was so delighted to receive this from you in the mail. As I said before we got on, probably the nicest book I have ever seen. So well put together, so beautiful, and congratulations on putting this out, because not only is it incredible on the outside, but it's the material on the inside that is going to help so many. So big congratulations to you.
Thank you very much.
Give us a little, like this, and I would like to show people who are watching on YouTube, this, the imagery inside and the attention to detail that you went through to put this together. Give our listeners and viewers a little insight. How long did this take you to write? And then once you get the manuscript done, to put it together and get all this, to be able to package it so nicely?
Well, at the end of a podcast where I had answered the question that you just mentioned, I said, form the habit of reading every day, something that moves you towards your ultimate goal. After that podcast, I thought, wouldn't it be great if someone came up with a tool, an app or a book? And then it hit me. I said, goodness, I've been collecting poems, quotes, and success stories for many, many years. I can do this. I can take these things I already have and put them together, and in 3 months, I'll have a book, and we'll be able to go from there. Well, that was in 2018, and it got published this year. So for the next 5.5 years, I spent time refining and changing and taking out things and putting in new things and doing research. The hardest part of putting the book together was I had 100 stories. And if I had put all of them in there, the book would have been, an encyclopedia. So I wanted it to be long stories, short stories, poems, and quotes, so that people could easily form a habit. Everyone is really busy. And sometimes you only have 5 minutes in a day. Sometimes you only have a minute. You get home, you're exhausted, but a habit has to be done consistently. If you miss a day, you're forming a habit of not doing that. So I wanted it to be so that if you had 5 minutes, you could read a poem. If you had 30 minutes, you could read a short story. If you had an hour, you could read one of the longer stories. Or if you got home and you're exhausted and you hit the bed and you thought, oh, I forgot to read, you can read a powerful quote and think about it all night long. And that that's really something that can help people. I sincerely believe this book will change a lot of people's lives if it's used the way it was intended. So to answer your question, over the next 5 years, I looked at each individual story, and they had to reach a certain level in order to stay in the book. That level was the story had to reach inside, pluck your heartstrings, and make a tear come to your eye. Just before I started to write, I read over again Og Mandino's The Greatest Salesman in the World. And in the first story, there was a couple of times in there I felt a tear coming into my eye. And I thought, if I can do that with my book, then I'll have a winner. And a couple of places in the book, like Walt Disney, when he did Snow White, one of his goals was with Snow White, if I can make people cry from seeing an artist's drawing up on a screen, then I will have achieved something. So that's really kind of the goal of the book. And I've never met anyone who's read the book who I've asked, I said, well, did any of it really touch you? And most of them said, oh, yeah, I cried. There's one story in there that if you don't have a tear in your eye when you've read it, you don't have heart. I mean, it's that powerful.
Yeah.
And Roger, I've read these stories at least 1,000 times, some maybe more, maybe 2,000. And in preparing for these podcasts, I'll listen to them again and I still cry. It seems like you get immune eventually, but no, the stories are just so powerful. These people went through so much and endured so much and still got up and still got up. They dusted their pants off and went again. And now they're world famous.
Yeah.
And when you hear their name, you never think of trials and tribulations. You think, oh, they're just famous.
No, that's right. And look, so thank you for walking us through that. It's really good to understand what happens behind the scenes. Like you, I'm a writer, so I understand. We always want to get our books out sooner than we think, right? I could do this in 3 months. Here it
Right.
took you, since what'd you say, 2018, right? So a long time, and that's okay because to me, we know our intuition tells us when the book is ready versus
Right.
not being ready. I've been working on a novel for 14 years. It's getting ready to come out this coming year in 2025, but it wasn't ready. I wanted to put it out 5 years ago, 7 years ago, but it wasn't ready. So I get it. But back to your book. First off, daily inspiration. I think that's crucial for people to understand when they pick this up. Like you said, you don't have to read this start to finish. Maybe at the end of the day, you just want to read an inspiring quote, and that's enough. What a nice way to end your day to go to bed. I want to touch on Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Secret. This is, if people haven't listened to The Strangest Secret, I highly recommend you do. I listened to that maybe 20, 25 years ago, and I could say that it changed my life. It changed my perspective on what I do every day. Uh, a lot of what you said early on of daily repetition is something Earl Nightingale talked about in The Strangest Secret because it takes so many days to form a habit. And to your point, you can't miss a day. If you do, you have to go back and start over again. So I'd love to know, based on, because we don't want to tell everyone all the stories in the book, but if we could highlight a few like Earl Nightingale, how did he make the cut of your top stories? and give us a little insight of what you talk about in the book about the stranger's secret.
Well, the Earl Nightingale story was never a question. It's a very powerful story about a young man who lived in a tent city when he was a baby. He was so poor, he lived in a tent. And the people, it was during the Depression, and everyone was very poor, but he was the poorest of the poor. And then he would look around and he saw that, well, some people are doing well. Why is that? Well, his mother was a big advocate of reading. Even though they were super poor, she still took him to the library and encouraged him to read. And she told him that the answers to all his questions could be found in books. Well, he said, well, where's the answer to the question, why are these people rich and we're so poor? And so she said, well, maybe all of the answers won't be in one book. You may have to look in a lot of books. Well, he did. He looked in many books. He asked a lot of people, but no one had the answer. So he made it a life goal to search out, where's the answer to this question? And then we take you through his life, through his hardships. And as a grown man, he was searching in an old used bookstore, and he started reading. He pulled out a book that had a strange name, and he started reading that book. And then it hit him. This is the book I've been looking for my entire life. It has all the answers to all my questions. And so he took that information in that book and wrote what he felt about it. He had an insurance company, and he recorded what he felt about the book and what he'd learned in the book. And then he went on vacation, and he left the recording for his salesman because he wasn't going to be at their sales meeting. And they listened to it. And when he came back from vacation, he was very surprised that they all wanted a recording. I have to have a recording of this. So he thought, maybe this will help other people. And he had a friend in the record business. Back then it was, LPs.
That's right. Yes.
And he had the recording done, and he thought no more about it. So the following year he got a call, and he said, they said, well, you have a golden record. And he said, what's that? They said, well, your record sold 1 million copies. And he said, really? And that was the beginning of the motivational training industry. That was the birth of it. So the story, of course, I skipped through it. I didn't put the really, really super moving parts, the touching parts in there. I'm going to let you read it to get that. But what a great story of the birth of an entire industry.
Yeah.
And what the poor man went through. His life was not easy, but he turned out to be one of the most famous recorders or people, radio personalities who ever lived.
Yeah.
And like you said a few years ago, you have his recording. When I was, 40 years ago, I had the cassette. I had a big package of cassettes. There must have been 25 or 30 of them in there. And I'd listen to every one of them over and over as I drove down the road while I was on my doing my sales.
Yeah. No, and look, and this is what's beautiful about it is there's people listening to this recording right now who have never heard it. So please go to YouTube, just put in The Strangest Secret, Earl Nightingale, and listen to it because it is profound. And also, please read this portion of Dennis's book to get the full story because, as you said, it is emotional, and the tears are there when you read this story as well. Thank you, Dennis, for talking about that. Can you give us one more story in the book, a little touch on one more for us, and then we'll move on to some other items.
Well, the first story in the book is it's called A Rocky Start, and I made it the first story so I could call it a
Right.
rocky start. It's about a poor You know, that like, most of the people in these stories started out poor, and he was living in a bus station, and he had his clothes in the car. He would take a shower in the YMCA, and it was him and his dog, and he loved his dog, and he was trying to become an actor, but he was failing at every turn, and he was starving. In fact, it got so bad that he had to sell his dog so that the dog would have food to eat. He couldn't even feed his dog. That's the bottom.
Yeah.
So one time, I think he was probably at a bar and watching the TV. He saw a boxing match between uh, Ali and the Bayon Bruiser. I couldn't think of Bayon. The Bayon Bruiser and Ali had a fight, and nobody expected the Bruiser to last a round. He was an unknown boxer. Well, the Bruiser went 15 rounds, and Sylvester Stallone was so impressed with that he sat down and for 3 days he wrote a screenplay, day and night. He didn't sleep. He just wrote for 3 days. And when he finished, he had about 100 pages, but he had what he thought was a good story. So the next few days, he went for an audition, and the audition didn't work out. The part just didn't fit. But right as he got to the door, he thought, there's producers here. I'll tell them about my screenplay. So he went over to the table and told them, and they half listened. They said, oh, bring it by. We'll look at it. And pushed him out the door. They really never expected to see him again. But the next day he showed up and handed them the play. When they read it, they loved it. They said, oh, we want to do this. And they offered him $350,000. And he said, oh, that's great. You know, I'll sell it to you for that, but I have to be the lead if you make a movie. Well, they said, no, we want Ryan O'Neal. You know, we want a superstar to play the lead in this movie. You can't do that. And so here's Sylvester living in his car, sleeping in a bus station, showering in the YMCA, and he had to sell his dog. And he said, well, it would kill me if the movie took off and I'm not in it. So he turned him down. He said, no, I won't do that. So they continued to negotiate, and they gave him $35,000 and a portion of the profits if there were any profits. And so he agreed to that. They let him produce the movie. They gave him $1 million, and he produced it. Now, $1 million was not much money to produce a movie. I mean, it was nothing. So he used handheld cameras. He used his family as actors and his friends. The scenes were in actual bars. They were in actual streets.
It wasn't on a set. It wasn't a set.
There was no set. So after the movie was completed, they put it out in a few movie theaters, and it got pretty good. You know, the people liked it. But the big challenge came when all of Hollywood, all the producers, all the directors came to see the screening because it had gotten some good reviews. So there were hundreds of people there, and he came in and sat down, and the movie started to play. No one laughed at the jokes. No one was shocked when when they should have been. And when it was over, they just got up and walked out. So he sat there in the movie theater with his head down. I can't even tell the tears running down his eyes because he knew it had failed, you know, and he'd wasted the $300,000. His life, you know, was going to go back. He was going to go back living in the bus station. So finally he got up enough strength to stand up, walk out the doors, and descend the steps. That's when he realized something's going on. Nobody's left. And when the first person saw him, they started to clap. And then as he walked down into the crowd saw him, the ovation was so loud that it rang off the walls. You see how powerful these stories are.
Oh, yeah.
So he didn't have to live in a bus station anymore. And he still, that's what 45 years later, he's still one of the most popular movie stars in Hollywood. I was just looking yesterday on YouTube, and there was a YouTube of a new movie that he's doing. So uh, it's these stories are about people who started with nothing, who struggled, and who took chances. They risked everything, and some of them did it over and over and over. And then now you read the story and you realize who this person is, and you think, really? Wow, I would have never known that because the name is just so big and they're so popular. But it didn't start out that way. And
Amazing.
that just, I mean, it gives you the strength to go on when things are tough in your life. You think, well, what about that? I'm nowhere near that. I've got food, I've got shelter. Yeah, everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine. Just stick to it. You're going to be okay.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that one. That's a special, special story. I heard bits and pieces of that story over the years, but to hear you tell it fully is it's just amazing. And it is so emotional.
That's
Uh,
better than the book.
yes. So, okay. What was the driving force for you, behind creating this book? What ultimately was it?
Well, I was an investor in real estate in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I moved here about 30 years ago, and I was really good. I mean, I was making a lot of money, but I wanted to get around other investors. I wanted to hear new techniques. And all of the real estate investing groups were in Dallas or in North Fort Worth and in Arlington. They're all in the Metroplex, but Metroplex is a big place. To go to North Fort Worth, 45 minutes. That's
Sure.
in Alabama, that's another city.
Right.
You're a long way away from someone else. And the same way with Dallas, it's another. So I started a group called the AREA, Arlington Real Estate Association of Investors. And so after I got the group started, I started teaching so that I'd learn. I would teach short sales, so I'd learn how to do short sales or subject to or whatever. And I became pretty good at those. And one of the members came up and he said, Dennis, his name was Mike. He said, Dennis, I'm going to retire in 3 weeks, and you're going to teach me what you do. And I said, Mike, I don't have time. I'm too busy investing in real estate. I just don't have time to do that. So he said, you don't understand what I said. He said, I am going to retire in 3 weeks, and you're going to teach me. He was insistent. And I said, well, he said, well, let me take you to lunch, and we'll talk about it. So I told Norma, my wife, I said, I'm going to tell Mike I'm not going to do this. I don't have time. I don't even want to do this. So we went to lunch, and after we finished eating, he pulled his checkbook out and he handed it to me and he said, here, you fill in the number. And I said, really? He said, yeah. So I said, all right, I know what I'll do. I'll put a number here that I know he won't pay. There's no way. So I put the number. He took the check, tore it out, signed it, and didn't even look at the number. That's when I started teaching.
Wow.
I started teaching real estate. I thought if somebody's willing to pay me that kind of money, I'll make as much teaching as I'm doing on real estate, and I don't even have to leave the house. So because I was getting so much, I thought, well, this better be a really good program. So that's when I started putting together my training program, and a big piece of the training program was getting their mind right. So I used motivational stories, quotes, and poems as part of their training to get their mind right. And that's how it came to be. My students were super successful. That's why I got invited to podcast. That's why I got invited to speak. And that's how the book came about. I had all of these for my students.
That's awesome. And can you give us some insight? What percentage of the students would you say had any experience with that type of mindset work going into this?
None of them.
Wow.
No, it was a
Isn't that
total.
incredible? Isn't
Yeah,
that incredible?
well, it's just not taught. I mean, you don't get it in school.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to want it. You have to go out and look for it.
And that's the other question I had for you because for myself, it was an older cousin of mine, uh, my mother's first cousin. His name was, he passed, but his name is Buster Fiacco. And he used to plow snow in the wintertime here in upstate New York. So every once in a while, he would call over the house when a storm was about to hit, and he would say, "Hey, you want to keep me company for a couple hours while I plow snow?" And I loved it because he was whatever 10 years older, and what he did with me is he would put in the cassette tape back then. This was like the late 70s, early 80s, I think it was. And, he would play these different, like Dennis Watley, I believe, was one of them. And so that was my introduction to this type of education that really wasn't mainstream. And so I'd love to know from your perspective, how did it start for you? And then how did you, think of intertwining this into your process when you started to teach others?
Well, I was a band director in the early 70s. My ultimate goal was to become a college band director. I enjoyed high school, but the kids just weren't quite as motivated. And of course, high school kids don't play as well as college kids, and they have parents.
Right. So you have to deal with all that.
That's right. So in college, you rarely ever see a parent. The kids are pretty good musicians when they get there. So I wanted to be a college band director, and I worked my way into a position where Georgia Tech called and said, "We want you to be our band director." So that was my ultimate goal for life. I was going to be a college band director. Well, I moved to Atlanta in preparation, and I got a call from a company in Tennessee. And they said, "Dennis, we want to hire you um, to work with us." And I said, "No, no, no. I've got the ultimate job. This is my life dream. I'm not going to do it." They said, "Well, we'll give you a round trip ticket. We'll put you up in a very nice hotel. We'll pick you up in a limousine. We'll buy you a steak." Well, who would turn down a round? Back in the early 70s, you didn't get to fly much. I was a poor boy from Alabama. Maybe I had one airline travel in my life. So I thought, I'll do that. I can turn them down, come back and go to work the next day. Well, to make a long story short, they offered me 20 times the amount at Georgia Tech. 20 times. I was just a young kid, broke. I'd never heard of money like that. So I took the job. And the first thing they did was give me 3 books. Before the training started, they gave me Think and Grow Rich, Success, the Glenn Bland Method, and The Greatest Salesman in the World. Roger, when I read those books, I was a different man when I finished reading them than when I started. I was on fire. I was so motivated. I couldn't wait to get in front of a customer. I made so much money that next year. I bought a home, a brick home. I mean, I grew up out the sticks with a, asbestos sided house. I bought a brick home. I got married. I was driving a Mercedes. I had every toy that a kid could imagine having, being 27 years old. But it just opened up the floodgates. It wasn't enough. I wanted more. So I got more books. I got cybernetics. I just kept buying books, reading and listening and reading. There was a company in Waco, Texas called SMI, where they would send you 2 tapes, you could listen, and you could send them back, and they'll send you 2 more. Well, they'd send them, and I would copy them, and I'd send them back. So I had this whole library of tapes, and I was driving all over South Georgia and North Florida, and I was listening to all of this stuff. Many of the poems and stories and quotes were on those tapes. And when one would really grab me, I'd say, oh, where's a pencil? I'm going to save that because someday I'm going to be making a speech or I'm going to be doing something and I'm going to need that. So I started the habit of saving poems and quotes and stories back in 1975.
Amazing.
Well, next year will be 50 years. And
Amazing.
you couldn't pay somebody to read for 50 years and just keep the best, the very, very best. That's what I did. And as you read this book, you'll see it won't take you long to get into the book to see, whoa, you see, it's not that I'm a good writer, it's that the stories were good when I started. I couldn't fail. All I had to do was be able to spell the words correctly and put them in the right order. And I did research to, to make them a little bit more interesting. I know the story of Lincoln. I have a daily list, and I came in, and the thing it said on my daily list was to take out the story of Lincoln. It was only like a page long, and it was only about how he'd failed so many times and still became the president. It wasn't really very interesting. So I thought, well, before I take it out, maybe I should do a little bit more research. So I found this really powerful story where if this one thing had happened, we wouldn't know the name Lincoln today. And the chances of it happening were like 1 in a million. And I thought, wow, I wonder if there are any more like that. After the 20th one, I finished the story. 20 different times where it took a miracle for us to even know the name Lincoln. That story, I mean, it'll make you think past the logical, because it is illogical. There is absolutely no way that he became the first Republican president, or even the president. Just so many times it came down to something where it said before it happened, it would take a miracle for this, and then the miracle happened. Over and over.
So how does your book differ from the other books out there like this, would you say? Because you've read them all.
There are no other books like this. This is not a motivational book that says, do this, do this, do this. No, this is examples. This is a book that was written to help you form a habit. There are no other books out there that are written to help you form the habit of, becoming a daily reader, moving you closer to your goal. So it's set up in about 5 different sections. The first section is testimonials from my students, where they say, listen to what this guy says. It'll change your life. Okay. The next section is, here's how to use the book. And if you don't read that and use it that way, you're wasting your time, because it's just a bunch of stories. But if you use it that way, then it's really powerful. It's like a law of nature. You're planting seeds that are going to grow and spring in, which is why my students were super successful. We planted the right kind of success seeds in their brain, and they grew. And so you got long stories, short stories, poems, quotes, a list of books. Now, these books are powerful. On Amazon, one of the reviewers said, I gave you the 5-star because of the books. That's a list of powerful books. And it is. And they're in priority order. And when you get down to number 200, it's almost as good as number 1.
That's amazing.
I mean, there's no way to say this is less good. It's just the order that they had to be in. If you read all those books, you're going to be a different person when you get finished.
And so if people take note on how they're supposed to read this book, how do you think that can empower them for their own life, the lives of those in their community? Like, just give an idea of the impact. Because again, until you're turned on to this type of mindset,
Yes.
It's hard to understand until you actually get into it. So you have to put in the work, but give us an idea on the other side, what could happen from a standpoint of impact, as your title says, real impact.
It is real impact. What if everybody you met had a positive mental attitude? What if they were all working toward an ultimate goal and reading and doing something every day that motivated and uplifted them? Wouldn't it be a wonderful world?
Yes.
No sour faces, no people, no derogatory comments, no people trying to bring you down, no narcissists. It would just be, everybody would be getting along and moving everything forward. Well, that's one thing. What if you took this wonderful book that you showed, which is a nice gift, I mean, if you give someone
Oh,
that, they open it up, they say, "Oh my gosh, that is a nice. It feels nice.
oh
It
yes.
has the weight." And as you mentioned before we started, the paper. I mean, I spent a lot of time just picking out the paper for the book. Well, what if you gave that to someone who just graduated from high school and you're someone they respected and you said, do what that says. It will change their life. I mean, it will literally set their course on a different, on a different. What if, if you're trying to go to the moon or even to Mars, let's say that you're trying to send a rocket ship to Mars and you were off 1 degree, how far are you going to miss? I mean, you'll be hundreds of thousands of miles off. This little tiny change in the degree of some young mind's life can make a tremendous difference in how happy they are, how successful they are, and how much they remember you. What a better legacy gift for a grandparent. I'm getting older, I'll be here forever. That's my book's my legacy. I'm leaving it for the world. But what if I had grandchildren, and I do? I sent this book to one of the people it's dedicated to, and his name's Tom Hendricks. He's one of the most respected business people in Tennessee. He has in colleges in Tennessee, they name buildings after him. That's how respected he is. And he got me started in business. And I sent him the book, and he wrote me a 4-page letter back. And he said, Dennis, this is a winner. Now, when he said that, I knew because I respect his opinion more than anyone else. And when he said that's a winner, I knew that I had a winner. But getting back to the question, this book will change your life, whoever you are, and it will change the lives of the people around you. Even if you don't give them the book, it'll make your family love you more and appreciate you more because you're going to be happier and friendlier, and you're going to bring in a lot of success that they're going to be happy about and be able to live with. And if you can get them to do it too, they will help you. I mean, the more people that you can get that has this kind of a mindset, and I don't want to be a preacher about it, but I am excited about it. And I know it really works because I've seen it work. Just read the testimonials in the beginning of the book, or go to Amazon and read. If you don't have the book, go to Amazon, read the reviews. They're
That's a
amazing.
lot. That's a,
And Roger, I want to give everybody that's listening a free copy with no strings attached of the ebook. So if you'll go to realimpactbook.com, scroll to the bottom of the page where it says podcast attendees. If you click on that, we will send you the book with no strings attached. You won't be put on any mailing list. You won't get any spam. You just get the book because I know if you get it, the ebook and read it, you're going to want to get the actual book because you have to have it to do
that's
to
right. Well, that's
process.
wonderful.
And
Thank you
you'll
for doing that. Thank you
thank you.
for doing that for our listeners.
Great.
And two follow-up things there. One, I am going to, you gave me an idea, and we're recording this before the Christmas holiday. So I am going to purchase a book for my daughter who just started her professional career down in Raleigh, North Carolina for her first job. So I think she'll really benefit from this. And also my son, who is 18, a freshman in college. I think they're both at that prime age, as you said, young minds. It made me think of it. So I'm going to do that for Christmas. I'm going to put it in their stocking. And I'm going to have a conversation with them. And then I'm going to share this podcast episode so they can hear from you about. So I encourage our listeners and our viewers to do the same. It'll make a wonderful gift. As you said. And look, I interview a lot of authors, a lot of clients. I told you before we came on, and I'm being honest, this is probably the nicest book I have ever had the privilege to hold. And but it's even more about the content inside. The other point I wanted to make, and I'd love to give you your thoughts on this. Everything you're talking about, from what I've experienced, there's no end, right? When we start on this path, it's all new, right? I think your book is a great way to share these stories and for us to open our minds. But My experience is I get connected to more like-minded people. Things happen in my life that I can't explain, and it opens doors to opportunity that you would never imagine, but you have to be open to this. And it's constant, it doesn't stop. There's constant learning. Like this discussion today gives me new thoughts that I didn't have before we started. So that's my point. And again, I want to get your thoughts on it, but even more so for our listeners and viewers, that please know that it is a law of the universe. This is inflexible, as Earl Nightingale says. It
Right.
works every single time, but you just have to be true to it and you have to believe it in your heart.
What you're saying is this, it is a law of nature. It's a law of nature like gravity, like inertia, like magnetism. You don't understand it, you can't see it, it's invisible, but since it's a law of nature, you cannot work against it. So, what if you became a magnet for successful people, for people who could help you move in the direction that you want to go? The first thing you got to know is what is it you want to do? I'm writing a book called The Seven Secrets, and the first secret is desire. The book, Think and Grow Rich, all the way through the book, it says there's this thing. There's this thing. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You're going to realize it somewhere in the book, and it never really tells you. I'm about to tell you. Here's the thing in Think and Grow Rich. It's a burning desire. If you know what you want, you have a burning desire to get there, this book will take you straight to there. But you have to know first. So the first of the seven secrets is you have to have a burning desire to do something. If it's being an attorney, you read about the law. If it's being a football player, you read about football. You read about sports. You become, what does Nick Saban read about? It's that kind of thing. If you want to become let's say Abraham Lincoln, once he first read books about the law, he realized this is it. This is me. This is what I want. Then he went into a courtroom and he thought, I'm home. I'm home. And he became from no education. He didn't even have a first grade education. He became the second most respected attorney in Illinois. From no education to the most respected attorney in Illinois to the president of the United States. And it was because he had a burning desire. And if you can find your burning desire and it's there, look, the desire is inside you, but most people say, well, I can't do it. I don't have the money. I don't have the connections. I'm afraid of what people will say. I mean, they have all these reasons why I can't do this desire. God gave you the desire and he gave you everything you need to get there. You just have to do it, accept it. And the book's a first step in that direction. And it's a big first step.
It is, and it's saving people time is what it's doing too, is that
Yes.
all these years, these 45 plus years that you've been accumulating these quotes and ideas and stories and
Right.
you put it into, so that's the benefit is that your readers now can be exposed to all of this hard work that you've put into this over your lifetime, really, which is just incredible. So again, I commend you. It's just a wonderful thing. What would you say is the most rewarding aspect of creating this book in general?
Well, every day I go to Amazon and look for reviews. When somebody says, there's one lady that said, this came just at the right time. I was having so many problems, and she listed some of them, and she said, and this just pulled me right out of it. You know, what could be better than that? And I had one podcaster where we were just discussing, and I gave him a quote, and he just became silent for a few minutes. And I said, what is it? He said, you just changed my life. That quote just changed my life because I never thought of anything like that. And I'll tell you the quote. It
Please.
was, well, we were talking about rituals, and I say every day I have a ritual when I get up. And one of the things I do is I go over these things. And one of the rituals is I say, today I will kill ants. I will kill ants every day. And an ant is any negative thought sequence.
Mm.
So when I think of anything negative, I immediately say, oh, that's an ant. I'm going to think of my dog. I'm going to think of my wife. I'm going to think of my business or my whatever, something happy. And I'm going to forget that ant's dead. And he said, that's just so powerful. Well, it really is. What if everybody you met didn't have any negative thought? Be a pretty nice world.
Yes.
And that's in the book.
That's great. Yeah, so give us an idea in your day-to-day life. Okay, you've been living this, breathing this for years and years and years. But of course, things come up that are inevitable, right? That you get a phone call out of the blue or an email or you see something. So how do you personally react? I mean, are you at that point that that analogy you just gave is 100% of the time?
Well, look, nature, another law of nature is nature does not permit vacuums. So people are going to have problems. If you don't have a problem, that's a vacuum. All right. And the longer you go without a problem, the bigger the vacuum and the bigger the problem's going to be. So one of the quotes in the book by me says, I stopped having problems a long time ago. I only have projects.
Hmm.
So it's how you look at it. People are going to die, people are going to get sick, you're going to have automobile accidents, you're going to trip, everything that is bad can be looked at as a project. Okay, I broke my arm. What's the project? Well, I got to go see a doctor, I got to get a cast, I got to, whatever it is,
Love that. You're reframing it.
you're reframing it and you just put it on your list and say, okay, this is the project, and all my projects are prioritized, and it's probably going to go to the top because I'm hurting. Okay. So, but if you don't look at problems as problems, you look at them as something that, I mean, you have to do it this way. You can either just let it hurt or you can do something about it. So if you make it a project, now you're going to break it into steps and you say, here's what I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And that's really all you can do anyway.
Right.
So, or you can mourn about it, or you just feel bad and, be unhappy for the rest of your life, which a lot of people choose to do. That's a choice.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that.
Dennis, awesome. We could go on for another hour, right? And I can never get sick of this topic. I would love to have you back again because I think there's still lots to talk about. I know you're working on your next book, so maybe we time it with that. But before I do let you go, a question I like to ask many of my guests is, and you mentioned the word earlier, the word is legacy. But at the end of the day, book and everything, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, the book is my legacy. After I'm gone, I want the world to be a better place than it was when I came because I was here. If you look at, you can just think of the names: Aristotle, um, Socrates, um, Napoleon Hill. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on forever, and a lot of them are in the books. In fact, after the list of books, there's a list of suggested reading
Yeah.
where it talks about read about these people. They're so interesting. So the book has enough in it for you to read for your entire life. You'll never be finished with it. And that's good. And it's planting seeds to change people's lives. And I sincerely believe that if I can get the word out, which is my project, and you're helping, that it's going to make a big difference in a lot of people's lives, a positive difference, so that when I'm laid to rest, it's not done for me. I'm done, but what I created goes on and on and on. And I sincerely believe that. I've often wondered, did Socrates know when he was here that hundreds of years after he's gone, he would still be talked about? I wonder.
Yeah.
Maybe he did. But I kind of feel like I will. I feel like I will. I feel like I'm like Napoleon Hill. And people ask, well, where does this book line up with other motivational books? I say it's kind of right behind Think and Grow Rich. It's right up in that area, close to the top. And again, I didn't make these stories up. They're real stories. They were good before I put them in the book. I was just lucky enough to find them and put them in the book and share them with a lot of people.
That's fantastic. And look, I would like to make a very bold statement on behalf of humanity. Thank you for putting this together, because that's what it's all about. This is your legacy. This will live on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And people will look back and say, this is the book that helped me. So wonderful job. Dennis, as I said, we could go on and on and on. Welcome to the American Real family. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. And I cannot wait to air this episode.
Well, thank you, Roger, and thank you for everything you do. You're one of those people that I feel like that was attracted to me, that makes things better for everyone you touch. I sincerely mean that.
Well, I appreciate it. Our team loves working with you as a client, and again, it's just wonderful to have this conversation today. So we'll put all the links in the show notes as well, a link to your book, a link to your website. So please, folks, take a listen. You will not regret it. Dennis, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to American Real. For more stories like this one, be sure to stop by AmericanReal.tv. Follow us on all social media to stay up to date with everything American Real. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and contact one of our publishing experts if you're ready to publish your book and become a best-selling author.